Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Monday, February 23rd, 2026, and if you've been scrolling through your feeds this morning, I'm willing to bet you've seen at least three headlines about what the latest AI models can actually do.
Oh, at least three. Probably more like 10.
Right. You know the drill by now. They're writing code faster than a senior dev. They're drafting these massive legal contracts in seconds, managing entire logistics chains without a coffee break. And it is undeniably impressive. But today, we're going to flip the script a bit. We are going to look at the side of the equation that almost nobody is talking about. We know AI can make the widgets, but who exactly is going to buy them?
It's really the fundamental question of economics that just seems to have been completely lost in the tech hype, hasn't it?
Yeah, totally buried.
And it is the central theme of the source material we are digging into today. We've got this fascinating and, frankly, quite startling new paper from the Global Review. It's by Dr. Fareed Novin and Associates. It's titled Artificial Intelligence, Labor Income Compression, and Financial Stability in Advanced Economies.
Which is, a massive mouthful of a title. It sounds like something you'd read to fall asleep on a plane. But once I actually started reading it, I realized this is basically a horror story for economists.
It certainly has some terrifying implications.
Yeah.
Because it's not a technical paper about neural networks or compute power or anything like that. It's entirely about the macro financial implications of what we're building.
Right.
The mission for our deep dive today is to explore a specific, very scary disconnect. AI is massively boosting production, but it might actually be killing the purchasing power needed to buy that production.
It feels like the ultimate be careful what you wish for scenario. I mean, we've spent 2 centuries obsessing over productivity. How do we make more stuff for less money? And Novin's paper basically says, well, congrats. You did it. You broke the machine.
Exactly.
So set the stage for us. I know you always like to have a visual in mind for these things. Where are we?
Okay, picture a study. Dark wood, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, maybe a view of a city skyline at dusk where the lights are just sort of coming on. And on the desk, there are two things. First, a stack of glowing reports on AI efficiency, just celebrating record-breaking output.
Shiny tech stuff?
Right. But next to them, a very worrying set of economic charts showing a line going down. That line is labor income. And the core tension we're exploring today is between that declining line and financial stability.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think most people, myself definitely included, have this default assumption that if companies become more efficient, that's just good for everyone. Prices go down, goods become abundant, we all get richer. That's the promise of capitalism, right?
That's the historical precedent, yes.
Right, so why does Novin argue this time is different? Why isn't this just like the Industrial Revolution?
That is the crucial question. It really comes down to the nature of the substitution. In previous industrial revolutions, machines replaced muscle. A tractor replaced 20 guys with shovels.
Sure.
But that tractor still needed a human to drive it, a mechanic to fix it, a manager to direct it. The machine substituted for routine manual tasks, which actually complemented human intelligence. It made the human's brain much more valuable.
Right, so we stopped digging ditches and we started engineering bridges. We moved up the value chain.
Exactly. But this wave, the wave we are living through right now in 2026, is fundamentally different. AI is substituting for complex cognitive functions. We are talking about analysis, coding, financial modeling, legal drafting.
So the brain stuff.
Yes. It's not coming for the muscle. It's coming for the brain. And historically, those cognitive jobs were the exact ones that generated the middle-class income that drives the entire economy.
So if you replace the brain, there's nowhere up to move to.
Precisely. And that breaks what economists call the virtuous cycle. In the traditional economic model, people work, they earn wages, they spend those wages on goods and services, and that spending becomes the revenue for companies. It's a closed loop. But in advanced economies, consumption is overwhelmingly funded by labor income, by wages.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting and where I actually want to push back a little to make sure I'm understanding this. If the AI is doing the work for free, or close to it, doesn't that just mean everything gets super cheap? So maybe I don't need a high wage because a new Ferrari costs $5.
That is the deflationary hope.
Right.
But there are two massive problems with that. First, debt doesn't deflate. If you have a mortgage, student loans, or credit card debt, those numbers stay exactly the same, even if the price of a toaster drops to zero. You still need income to service the past.
Oh, wow. Good point. My bank doesn't care if widgets are cheap.
No, they certainly do not. And second, Novin introduces a concept in the paper called the demand sustainability constraint. Think of it this way. Imagine a car factory that figures out a way to make infinite cars for zero cost using robots. The owner is ecstatic. His margins are 100%. But to achieve that, he fires all 10,000 of his human workers.
Right, I'm with you. Infinite cars, no payroll.
So now you have a parking lot full of free cars. But the 10,000 people who live in the town have zero income. They can't buy the cars, even if they are dirt cheap, because they have literally no money. And they can't buy anything else either. So the factory owner has no customers. He has infinite supply and zero demand.
So the factory goes bankrupt precisely because it was too efficient.
Exactly. The paper calls this income routing. It's a mechanical way to think about the economy. Market economies actively require effective demand to clear supply. If the money doesn't get routed from the company back to households via wages, the households can't route it back to the company via spending. The plumbing just gets completely clogged.
Income routing. I really like that term. It makes it sound less like a political issue and more like an engineering problem. If the pipes are broken, the water stops flowing.
That's a great way to look at it.
But here's the thing that confuses me. If this structural problem is so obvious that firing your customers is bad for business, why does the stock market seem to not care at all? We are sitting here in 2026 with stocks at all-time highs. Is the market stupid?
The market isn't stupid, but it can be highly myopic. This is where we get into the psychology of finance. Markets are forward-looking discount mechanisms. They price a stock today based on what they think the company will earn in the future. Right now, the market is looking at AI and seeing it entirely as a margin expander.
They see the cost savings. They see, oh, I don't have to pay a legal team. I can just use this model, so my profits go way up.
Precisely. They are pricing in the efficiency, but they are suffering from what economists call the fallacy of composition.
Which means
They assume that what is good for one company is good for the entire economy. If one company cuts labor costs, they win. But if every company cuts labor costs, total aggregate wages in the economy drop.
and total revenue drops because no one has money to spend.
Correct. The market is celebrating the cost-cutting, but entirely ignoring the revenue-killing side of the exact same coin. And Novin warns that if these two realities collide, high stock prices based on the expectation of high growth, meeting the reality of low consumer spending, you get what he calls nonlinear repricing.
Nonlinear repricing. That sounds like a very polite, very economist way of saying the market falls off a cliff.
It is essentially a crash, yes. But the nuance is important. It's not just panic, it's a mathematical correction. The risk isn't necessarily an immediate collapse tomorrow, but an expectation misalignment.
Okay, meaning what?
Meaning, if the market expects 10% growth forever because of AI, and suddenly reality delivers negative 2% growth because of income compression, the adjustment between those two numbers is, well, it's violent.
Okay, so that's the danger. The income routing breaks, the market realizes it too late, and we get a crash. But this paper doesn't just say doom and gloom. It actually models this out using a Bayesian scenario framework.
Yes, and this is really the core value of the source material. It moves beyond just pure speculation and assigns actual probabilities to 4 different futures based on current trends.
Let's walk through these because I feel like you listening at home need to know which door we're likely to walk through. Let's start with the best case scenario. Scenario A, coordinated adaptation. The paper gives this about a 30% probability. What does the good ending look like?
In this scenario, governments recognize the income routing problem early. They step in with effective redistribution mechanisms. This could be tax reforms, targeted transfers, or even public equity participation, where the public essentially owns a slice of the AI infrastructure.
So the government ensures that even if you aren't working or your wages are much lower, you still have money to spend. The government fixes the plumbing manually.
Right. Household demand stays stable. The stock market sees some sectoral reallocation, meaning money moves from old industries to new ones. But there's no systemic crash.
But wait, 30% seems remarkably low for the sane option. Why isn't this higher?
Because of the coordination problem. The paper explicitly mentions regulatory arbitrage. If the U.S. taxes AI companies heavily to fund a basic income, but Singapore or Ireland doesn't, where do you think the AI companies will host their models?
Oh, they'll just move to Singapore.
Exactly. Without global cooperation, which is historically very difficult to achieve, the good ending is incredibly hard to pull off. Capital is highly mobile, labor is not.
That makes total sense. Okay, let's look at scenario B, gradual demand compression. The paper assigns this the highest probability, about 35%. This is the slow bleed.
This is the path of least resistance. In this future, labor income just lags behind productivity. Redistribution policies do happen, but they're too slow, too politicized, or too partial to fully bridge the gap.
So people just slowly get poorer relative to the overall economy.
Yes. Think of it as a world where the GDP numbers look amazing on paper, but your neighborhood looks worse. Consumer-facing sectors, retail, hospitality, casual dining, they start to underperform. They just can't hit their targets. As a result, equity valuations, the stock prices, compress gradually over several years. It's not a crash, it's a stagnation.
It's a slow decline in quality of life. The shiny robots are absolutely everywhere, but nobody can actually afford to go out to dinner.
That is a very evocative way to put it. It leads to immense social friction, but not necessarily an economic explosion.
Okay, well, now let's talk about the explosion. Scenario C, nonlinear financial repricing, a 20% probability. This is the Minsky moment.
This is the scenario where the market stays irrational for far too long. Investors remain overly optimistic, totally blinded by the supply-side potential. They keep bidding up stock prices, convinced that AI earnings will just last forever. They vastly overestimate the durability of those earnings.
And then the music stops.
Suddenly, the catalyst would likely be a specific earnings season. Imagine it's Q3 of 2027. Suddenly, Amazon, Walmart, Ford, they all miss their revenue targets by huge margins because consumers just flat out stop buying.
The bubble pops.
And it pops hard. Earnings forecasts are slashed overnight. Credit spreads widen, meaning it gets extremely expensive to borrow money. It's a demand-driven collapse. It's essentially 2008, but caused by AI efficiency paradoxes rather than bad mortgages.
That is terrifying. But there's one more door. Scenario D, the one that sounds like a dystopian sci-fi novel. Institutional stress and fiscal fragmentation, 15% probability. What happens here?
This is the chaos scenario. To understand this, you have to remember how most advanced economies actually fund their governments. What is the primary source of revenue?
It's income tax, payroll tax.
Correct. Roughly 40 to 50% of government revenue comes directly from taxing labor. If AI replaces labor, income tax revenue evaporates. Robots do not pay payroll tax.
Oh, wow. I totally hadn't connected that dot. No wages means the government itself goes broke.
Exactly. In this scenario, fiscal systems literally run out of money. They can't fund schools, roads, or the military. And at the exact same time, unemployment is rising. So the demand for social services is higher than ever before.
So the government has zero money coming in and massive demands for money going out.
It creates a death spiral. Political polarization intensifies because everyone is fighting over a rapidly shrinking pie. Sovereign credit spreads widen, meaning countries themselves have trouble borrowing money on the global market. International coordination breaks down completely.
So a 15% chance that the actual institutions of society just crumble.
It is significant. And note that if you add up the probabilities of the bad or challenging outcomes, B, C, and D, you get 70%. The smooth transition is the minority outcome here.
That is a deeply sobering stat, 70% chance of a rocky road. Now, looking at these scenarios, are we seeing any warning lights flashing right now, today, in February 2026, or is this all just theoretical modeling?
The paper argues the red flags are absolutely already visible. The overarching danger lies in what Novin calls the temporal gap. Technology moves exponentially, but institutions, our laws, tax codes, social norms, they adapt linearly. We are living right now in that gap.
And what are the specific indicators Novin points to in the real world?
First, the persistent decline in labor's share of income. That line is already trending down and has been. Second, equity market capitalization is heavily concentrating in AI firms. The market is betting everything on the robots. Third, we see a massive divergence between productivity growth, which is skyrocketing, and median wage growth, which is completely flatlining.
So the rich, or rather the capital owners, are getting richer, the efficiency is going through the roof, but the average worker isn't seeing a single dime of that benefit. That's not just a theory, that's the data we have today.
Precisely. And the takeaway here shouldn't just be tech is bad, it's that the economic machinery is misaligned. The paper explicitly states, the core constraint is not technological feasibility, but income routing.
So let's talk solutions. How do we fix the routing? If scenario A is the goal, what are the actual mechanisms? The paper lists a few proposed solutions, but are they realistic?
The necessity of them is undeniable. Sustained AI growth must be paired with institutional redesign. The paper proposes three main levers. First, coordinated taxation of AI capital returns. If the robot does the work, you tax the robot's output, or rather, the capital owners profit much, much more heavily than we do now.
Which makes sense. If income tax is dying because there are no wages, you have to tax the thing that is making the money. You shift the entire tax base from labor over to capital.
Exactly. The second proposal is public equity participation in core AI infrastructure. Imagine if the government, and by extension the public, owned 10 or 20% of the foundational AI models.
Oh, sort of like the Alaska Permanent Fund, but instead of oil, it's code.
That is the perfect analogy. In Alaska, the citizens get a dividend because they collectively own the natural resource. In this model, the citizens would get a dividend because they collectively own a piece of the automation. As the models become more profitable, that wealth flows directly back into the public purse.
That actually sounds surprisingly capitalistic. You're just making everyone a shareholder.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
It turns the public into stakeholders in the automation rather than victims of it. And the third mechanism is targeted transfer mechanisms funded by these productivity gains. This is essentially routing that money back to household purchasing power.
Basically, you take the money from the AI productivity and put it directly in people's pockets so they can go buy the stuff the AI just made. It closes the loop.
Without that loop, the system breaks. The expert analysis here is extremely clear. The goal isn't charity. It's systemic survival. You cannot have a market economy without customers. If AI destroys the customers to save money, it destroys the market.
It's the snake eating its own tail.
Perfectly put. And that is why Novin emphasizes that this isn't a problem that solves itself. The invisible hand of the market doesn't automatically fix income distribution. It just finds the most efficient way to produce. It is entirely up to policy to fix the distribution.
So what does this all mean for you, for the listener driving to work right now, or the investor looking at their portfolio? Because we've covered a lot of high-level macro plumbing here.
If we summarize, AI is creating a massive supply shock. We can make more than ever before, but it risks a demand shock. We have less money to buy it. If you are an investor or just keeping an eye on the economy, the canary in the coal mine is valuation compression in consumer-dependent sectors.
Meaning watch the companies that sell things to regular people. If they start tanking while the tech companies just keep soaring, we are heading straight for scenario C or D.
Exactly. Watch the gap between the tech giants and the retailers, the car manufacturers, the hospitality chains. If that gap gets too wide, the rubber band is about to snap.
And that leads us to our final thought for the day. We've talked about the temporal gap, that dangerous window where the tech works, but the economy hasn't caught up.
That is the provocative question I'd leave with the listener. We are currently betting heavily on the technology. The stock market, the venture capital, the headlines, it's all a massive bet on the tech working. But the real risk isn't the code, it's the adaptation.
So ask yourself, are you betting on the robots? Or are you betting on our ability to rewrite the rules of the economy fast enough to survive them? Because right now the robots are winning the race and the rules are just gathering dust.
And being well-informed means looking at that boring structural plumbing, the tax codes, the income routing, not just staring at the shiny new machines.
That's all for today's deep dive. Keep your eyes on the data, not just the hype. We'll see you next time.